This is Straight No Chaser Talk Radio. We're just getting started. Straight No Chaser Talk Radio.
He's drinking that with no chaser.
This is Straight No Chaser Talk Radio. We're just getting started. Straight No Chaser Talk Radio.
He's drinking that with no chaser.
This is Straight No Chaser Talk Radio. We're just getting started. Straight No Chaser Talk Radio.
He's drinking that with no chaser.
Hello. How are you all doing, everybody? Good people, how are you? It's another week. It's another week of Straight No Chaser. This is your boy Thin Bad and the Chief.
Hey.
And Ambeezy is doing what Ambeezy does. Ambeezy is ambusy.
Yeah, how about that?
Doing her thing, but that's good. Good things coming from her. Good things coming from her. She's doing her thing, and you all will hear about it soon enough.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of enough, we've got all this talk going on. Everything has become pretty hot and heavy. It's been going on for a while now. We've heard upstart things about Confederate monuments and, back and forth we've been going. Some people are arguing it's historical, but then there are others that are like they're disgraceful. So that's the question we're going to deal with tonight. Historical monuments and things like that. Are they historical or are they disgraceful? So to help us go through that too, we've got a special guest this evening. We got Kevin Powell, who is going to be joining us. And as we enter into this conversation, it is a whole lot of stuff all across the country. Part of what I like about doing this show with you, Chief, is that you're on the West Coast.
Yes, sir.
You've got things going on over there. I'm over here on the East Coast, sort of, and then kind of down south at the same time in North Carolina. And you've got some things going on here in North Carolina around certain buildings. Right now in Fayetteville, there's a discussion that's going on about if you look up Fayetteville, North Carolina on Google or anything like that, there's a building that pops up. That building is called Marketplace. But part of the history of that building is that it's slaves were sold there, and according to one of the things that you can look up on Google. It talks about as the focal point of downtown Fayetteville. The Market House was built in 1832 on the site of the old State House, which has where North Carolina delegates had ratified the U.S. Constitution. And then the next couple paragraphs down, it says occasionally enslaved people were sold at Market Square. We're just going to slide that in. Occasionally, but we want you to come visit. I mean, they have it down. If you go on TripAdvisor and things like that, they show this marketplace. And so it had come to prominence more so now since the post George Floyd protests, because they took place down there. Now, of course, George Floyd, was born in Fayetteville. So there were a lot of people at the protest, and they gathered. They went downtown Fayetteville, and right at the center downtown is Marketplace. We see things happening. Black Lives Matter painted in the streets of Washington, D.C., but around this marketplace this past week, they painted Black Lives Matter and End Racism around. There's a traffic circle that goes around this marketplace that I was just talking about in Fayetteville. And so they just painted Black Lives Matter around there. So it's a discussion because you have people who are on one side or the other. Now, I know this isn't necessarily dealing with monuments in particular, like statues and things like that. But here is this thing. We've got this fight where some folks are calling it historical, And then there are other folks who are calling it disgraceful. So, Chief, I mean, what are you thinking? What are you thinking on this? What's happening out your way?
Well, we're getting some of the same type of comments that you're getting. Some people are saying that it's historical. You've heard the whole deal with it being, this is a pride thing. This is part of our history and all that kind of stuff. And I've heard some other perspectives where people are saying, well, if we tear all this stuff down, I think you and I were talking about this before the show. If you tear some of these things or all these things down, where will we be able to show our young people that this really happened? We're not making this up. Now, of course, they're talking about putting these things in museums and all these other places, but I know that's been one of the discussions I've heard also. If I can take my class to point A and actually see this guy or this thing, then, at least conceptually, the students rather, can understand what I'm talking about. So, I've heard a couple of different arguments about it in terms of whether they should go or whether they should stay.
Yeah, it's it's really hard to now everything is so charged. Everything is so politically charged, but and there's two schools of thought, even in the Black community. There's some folks who are one of the unique things about what's the Fayetteville piece is you've got descendants of slaves that are there in that city who have to see this every day. So no matter how much you call this something historical, eyesore to them, and a pain. In fact, let me I'm gonna play a clip of something that was said during to give you an idea of what was happening there.
Okay.
Property in question is where slaves used to be sold, right out here by the market house, which is why it's a painful reminder and why some protesters want it taken down. City council members all tell me they agree that some type of change needs to happen with this property, and now they're trying to figure out how to best do that. Rakeem Jones organized the peaceful Skybo Road protest earlier that day. What do you want to see done with the market house?
Like everybody else, I want to see it done. It's kind of like big middle finger in the middle of town.
Rakeem wants the public to be able to vote on this issue, saying he thinks the majority would vote to tear it down and put up something that works for everyone.
You got to do it the right way.
City Councilwoman Courtney Banks McLaughlin says she recognizes the pain this represents for some in our community. She wants public input about where to go from here.
Do you guys want to see change? Do you want to keep the market house? Do you want the market house tore down? Do you want to see us add something to it to tell the story, the truth, the whole entire story?
The city historian says the market house is one of less than 40 national landmarks in North Carolina, and that slaves were sold where the traffic circle is, but not at the actual market house.
And I want us to learn from history.
Councilman Johnny Dawkins wants to form a committee to figure out what to do with the building.
We have to tell the truth because this is history behind me.
Do you want to see it torn down?
No, we need to make this facility something positive for those who feel pain.
So there you have it. So I don't, I don't know what you do. I mean, in some cases now here in Greensboro, you have the where the actual the sit-ins took place at the Woolworths building. They kept that building. The actual building is there.
Sure.
They did send some of the stools off to the Smithsonian, but they made it a museum.
Sure.
So where you are learning and figuring out, where people have to see what it is, because there's a fear, on some point, if you erase everything, if you erase all of what was, then people, will act as if it never happened. Maybe not immediately, but years down the line. And so there's that, like, well, if you ever get into the discussion about reparations and things like that, 50, 60, 100 years from now, the further removed you are from it. And it's like, reparations for what? Like, for slavery. Well, what evidence is there of slavery?
Exactly.
There's none of this here. There's nothing there. What buildings? They sold slaves where? If you tear it down, what happens? But then there are others who are like, no, hell no, tear it down. I don't want to see it. We don't need to have it. It's just a constant reminder of what this country did. And for me, I kind of want the country to be reminded,
Sure.
so that, you don't get so high and mighty. Don't forget, because, you can slip back at any moment. But they're differing opinions all the way around.
Well, I'm interested to hear from our guest, Kevin Powell, because I know he's a world-renowned author and just recently appeared on Joy Reid on MSNBC in the height of all the protests. And Kevin, are you there with us, sir? Kevin, are you there with us?
Yes, my fraternity brothers. How are you both doing? It's good to be with Alpha Men as always.
All right, sir.
Keep the light shining. That's right.
There you go.
Lift the light.
I got excited when I saw the Alpha paraphernalia behind both of you. I said, yes. Yes. It's a beautiful thing.
Yes, it is.
Indeed. Good to have you
back with you all again. Just thank you for the honor of being here. I appreciate it.
So, Kevin, you've been following some of these monument things, and I know that you have been on some of the national talk shows talking about the Black Lives Matter movement and those types of things.
Yes,
and
sir.
You are known around the country for your commentary, particularly as it relates to issues that impact the African American community. So we're so happy to have you here. Now, when we're talking about the Confederate monuments, and you've heard all the discussions, and some people are saying it's historical, some people are saying it's disgraceful. Kind of give us your perspective on this and how we should be looking at this thing.
Well, I think, it's an important conversation that's happening. And people have said, if I can just start here, that protests don't matter. Well, they do matter, because we wouldn't even be having the conversations on this level the way we are all around the country and even globally, because I've done a number of interviews with folks overseas as well in the past couple of weeks. And the reality is that this country has had a couple of opportunities. Our country has had a couple of opportunities to deal squarely with race and racism. The first time is when the so-called founding of the country and the founding fathers with the Constitutional Convention, and they chose, to put down in the Constitution that black folks were free-fisted human beings, certainly not free black people. And we know that
Sure.
several of them, died with their black folks still as slaves, even when they passed on. The second opportunity was during the Civil War, and that period immediately after Reconstruction, 1865 to 1877. That was an opportunity to have a real serious conversation about race. There were some things that happened. My family's home state is South Carolina. We know that there was some black representation politically that happened. Several HBCUs popped up during that time. And so we saw some progress, and that it was stymied and shut down when Rutherford B. Hayes made that compromise in 1877 to be president. And that led to, 90 years of vicious segregation, lynching, the whole 9 yards. And we know the last opportunity was the civil rights movement. And even there, with the progress that we made with the Civil Rights Bill in 64, the Voting Rights Act in 65, other significant things that happened. I'm a first-generation college student because of the Civil Rights Movement, very clear about that, thanks to the work of folks who came before us. But then that was shut down. And so, here we are now in 2020, and, we have to understand that this is very different times, than the 50s, 60s, even the 1990s, even the 2000s. There's something called social media that sends information out there so quickly. And so a lot of people are raising questions in ways that I've never seen before. I've been an activist for 36 long years, and a lot of stuff, that we're talking about, we've been talking about for years, those of us who are movement folks, who are political folks. The difference is that a lot of folks are saying, wait a minute, why is everything named after Christopher Columbus? Why do we have a Confederate flag in these different places? Why is it that we have all these buildings and monuments and statues and things named after Confederate folks? And it's not just a reaction to George Floyd, it's a reaction to the pandemic, 3 years of Donald Trump. All these different things are happening that I think are leading to people saying, let's get rid of everything. Now, to you all's point, and I was listening very closely, I do think that what really needs to happen in this country is a mass re-education of people to tell the history of America holistically. Right. Mm-hmm. The way our late great scholar, Howard Zinn did with the People's History of the United States. It's very important.